Hi everybody, and welcome to tonight's webinar. My name is Ann Dolan, and we're thrilled to have you with us tonight talking about summer learning. Tonight, we're going to be talking about avoiding the summer learning slide and practical ideas you can use in your home, whether your child is 4, 14, or even an older high school student. So let's go ahead and get started. First, let me talk to you a little bit about how to participate in this webinar. On the right-hand side of your panel, of your screen, you should have a panel, and that panel should have questions or chats. That's a place where you can type in your question that you may want to ask me as we go along, and I would love to hear from you. So if you feel like you have a question, maybe I didn't cover something, you want additional information, please feel free to type it in at any point, and I'll answer your questions as we go along. And at the very end, we'll reserve about 10 to 15 minutes to talk about specific questions that parents have so that we can get everything answered. Please note that everybody is in listen-only mode, and that means that I cannot hear you and you won't be able to talk to other people. You'll just be able to hear me. So we'll communicate through the chat. It's also important to know that I will be sending you a copy of this PowerPoint tomorrow. So feel free to take notes tonight, but also remember that you'll get a copy of the same PowerPoint we're going to discuss through email tomorrow. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. First, I want to mention that, again, my name is Ann Dolan, and for the last 20 years, I've been a classroom teacher, a tutor, and a consultant. I'm the founder of Educational Connections, which I started in 1998. After I left Fairfax County, my first son was born. His name's Will. And tonight, I was going to do this webinar with one of our wonderful tutors, Stephanie Wright, but unfortunately, she's sick. So I've recruited Will. He was happily playing Xbox until about 10 minutes ago. And he's going to be part of our webinar tonight in a role play. What we're going to cover, we're going to talk a little bit about why summer learning is important and what parents can do. And most specifically, I want to give you some practical recommendations for reluctant learners and especially reluctant readers. Let's talk a little bit about why summer learning is important, because a lot of parents ask me, you know what, shouldn't I just give my child a break? Shouldn't I, let him just chill out for the whole summer, or shouldn't she just have time to unwind and not do anything? And the answer is not really. There should be a middle ground. That means that students should be able to have some downtime, that's for sure, but they should engage in something during the summer months, because if they don't, they can actually lose up to 4 months of progress. And it's most typical for kids to lose about 2.5 months of academic gains that they've made during the school year. But really, the answer is reading 4 books over the summer, and 4 books has been proven by research to really stop the summer learning slide. It means that if a student reads 4 books on their grade level over the June, July, August time period, they're not going to lose ground in reading. And that's super important. And not only do these kids retain what they've learned, but they do better on fall reading tests, and that they have better first quarter grades. So that's really important. But the question to parents kind of asks us, what do we do? How do we bridge this gap between our kids not wanting to do anything and us as parents, especially here in the Washington, D.C. area where a lot of us are type A and we want the best for our kids? How do we get them to do what we want them to do? Is there a happy medium? And there really is. That's what we're going to talk about tonight. But the first step in discussing this with our kids, especially our older students, is really to open up the dialogue. And we always want to set time aside to talk about this with our kids. We don't want to, all of a sudden, our kids roll out of bed the first day of summer and we smack them with a bunch of work. It's better to say, Mary, after dinner tomorrow night, let's talk about what you might want to do over the summer in reading, or how you might get that summer work done that your teacher has assigned. But you want to set up a time to talk. And there's certainly a way you can approach your kids. We call them traps and tickets. Traps are really what not to say. Certain things that kind of make our kids go crazy and they don't want to take our advice. But tickets are really how we can approach our kids in a more productive manner to hopefully get them to buy in to summer learning. So Will and I are going to role play a little bit right now. And I'm going to be the role of the mom, which is easy, and he's going to be Greg. And Greg is my 14-year-old son. So here is an example of a trap. Again, I'm going to be mom. Greg, I just got your summer reading list from the school. And let me tell you something. This year, there's not going to be any of this waiting around until the last minute thing to do your summer reading. Last summer was completely ridiculous. I can't believe you waited until the last few weeks to even start reading the book your teacher assigned. I mean, that was so stressing me out. So this summer, you're going to get up every morning and you're going to read for a half hour. You got it, buddy?
But Mom, what if I have a camp or something to do?
Well, listen, young man, you're just going to get up extra early on those days to get it done. You got it?
Fine, whatever.
That didn't go so well, did it, Will?
No.
Well, how would you feel if I told you what you were going to do over the summer?
Not good.
What would you do?
Wouldn't get it done.
Why not?
Because I wouldn't. Because you didn't really set up for like a timeline for me to do things, and I need like more structured schedule.
You like a more structured schedule?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you like how I just told you to do it?
No.
And most kids don't. So here's an example of a ticket, and this would be a better dialogue, a more productive dialogue. And notice I'm asking him questions this time around. I'm not telling him what to do, but I'm leading him with options. Greg, I just got your summer reading list from school. Remember last summer when everyone was stressed out, when all that reading still had to be done, and it was already the end of August?
Yeah, I remember.
Well, what do you think you might do differently this year so that you can enjoy the end of your summer and not feel so stressed out?
I don't know.
Can you think of a few ways you might be able to do a little bit at a time?
Well, maybe I could read a few pages every night.
I love that idea, Greg. That's terrific. So if your book has about 200 pages, how many do you think you might want to read every night?
Maybe like 10.
I like 10. That sounds like a good number. Maybe you could give yourself a little bit of leeway, too, say between 5 and 15 pages. Maybe there might be some nights you're not in the mood, and then other nights you feel like reading a lot.
All right, I guess. That sounds good.
Okay. Oh, and you know what I was just thinking? I'm dying to read The Girl Who Kicks the Hornet's Nest. Wouldn't it be a great idea if everybody in the family picked a book and we all read at the same time? What do you think of that idea?
Yeah, that actually sounds like a really good idea. Can I see that book list?
Sure, here you go. Thanks, Will. How did you feel about that discussion?
A lot better.
Why?
You were really asking me a lot of questions. You weren't really telling me what to do. I didn't feel really forceful.
But I thought you liked to be told what to do.
I do. I like to have a schedule.
I was just kidding. You don't like to be told what to do.
No.
All right. So anytime we can ask our kids questions, we can say things like, what options do you have? What would be the first steps? Those types of questions are leading questions, and they really help kids to feel more empowered and get the work done. So thank you, Will. All right. So let's talk a little bit about some other tips. And as I mentioned, it's always really important to get your child's input in developing a solution to when it comes to reading. And I found that starting the dialogue early on, not waiting until July and definitely not in August, but even before school gets out or right that first week after school gets out, opening a dialogue is helpful, and setting a routine most definitely. You know, even if your child does 20 minutes of reading and math or writing every day, it's huge. And for Will, what I would do, especially an older or a younger student, is put it in writing and probably put a checklist or some kind of way to keep track of the reading, how many pages are getting done in a place where everybody can see. And if everybody in your family is reading a book, it's a great way for everybody to just check off, you know, it might have the child's name, the name of the book, and then they can put tally marks for the chapters so that everybody is on the same page. It's much better to do it this way, and when things are in writing, kids are a lot more amenable. I know that when things are out of sight, they're often out of mind when it comes to kids. That's why it's always a great idea to put things in writing. And for younger kids, you may want to tie what they do to earning privileges. So for example, let's say that you want your child to do 15 minutes of reading and 10 minutes of math. Well, maybe for that reading and the math, they can earn certain things. For example, in math, they could earn 30 minutes of TV time. And for reading, they can earn 30 minutes of TV time. And if they show you what they've done, when they're done with it, they get an additional 15 minutes. So little checklists like this for younger kids are often very helpful. Let's talk a little bit about reluctant readers. And quite often when we're talking about summer, this is where, we can really get in butt heads with our kids because they think that reading is really laborious, but really there are some fabulous books out on the market right now that can really make reading come alive. And if you want a great website to go to, I can highly recommend ALA.com, which stands for American Library Association. Type in reluctant readers, and they have book lists for every grade level, and it's just fabulous. You can see some super cool books. Show those lists and the synopsis to your kids and let them pick the book they want. But for elementary kids, I can definitely recommend The Lemonade War, which is a terrific book. It's about siblings that find out, they're twins, that they're going to have to be in the same fourth grade class in the fall. And they're already in a battle because they're just so mad that they are going to be in the same fourth grade class. And so the battle turns to this lemonade stand. They want to see who can earn $100 first, and it gets into all the mischief and all the crazy things they do to win. I have to recommend Chasing Lincoln's Killer, and this is a fabulous book for older elementary, middle school kids. I read it with my son, with Will, when he was in fourth grade, and my younger son read it again this year. He's 10. And it's just a phenomenal book about the chasing of John Wilkes Booth and how they, every step he made after the assassination. It's just a thriller. Kids are just completely attracted to this book. And what's great is that it's nonfiction. And nonfiction text has actually been shown to improve comprehension more than fiction text. So I highly recommend that book. And then another great one for older kids, for high school kids, is about an 18-year-old named Ben Wolf, who has been given less than a year to live. This one is called Deadline, and he chooses not to tell anybody so that his senior year in high school is going to be as normal as possible. And it's actually a pretty humorous story that tracks the final year when Ben goes out for football, he finds romance, and he realizes that his secret has a serious impact on others. And even if your child is reluctant to read books that can capture even the most reluctant readers, consider an Audible book. And this is a great way for kids to take what they see as, the misery or the just, really not the enjoyment out of books. And it's to download an Audible version, and you can get these on Kindle. You can go to Books on Tape. There are a million different places you can get Audible books, but they're really fabulous because students can listen to the book as they read along. And the key is they can't be staring out into space. They really have to be reading along. Studies show that kids can improve comprehension of books that are tough for them, that they might have a hard time reading on their own, more if they read an Audible book or listen to an Audible book than if they read it themselves. So Audible books are a fabulous way to get kids hooked on literature, even if they don't want to, and to help them improve their comprehension. For little kids, I recommend Headsprout.com and StudyDog, and these are great interactive programs that kind of take the guesswork out of what we have to do as parents to get our kids engaged. And they're really terrific. They're video game format ways to teach reading. So they teach decoding, which is sounding out, and fluency, reading quickly. I highly recommend them. But really, you want your child to be engaged in some type of reading. And if you have a student that's not too excited about it, encourage them to enroll in a program. You can either enroll at your local public library. Barnes & Noble has a great program. And one of my favorite ones is the Scholastic Summer Reading Challenge. I love it. I love it because when kids pick a book, and they pick one that's on the Scholastic list, they can do really cool things like set up a chat with other kids reading the book. They can read blogs from the author. There are even live web chats from authors of these books. They can submit their writing pieces to be published. So it's super interactive. Kids love it. And the best part for kids is that they earn prizes at the end of the summer. Also, some parents want a more structured approach to the summer, and the Summer Bridge activity workbooks are just fine. They're a little bit, you know, not as captivating to kids as some of the online programs, but they're really great for getting the basics. So you can buy them from like 2nd to 3rd grade, and that would be a child finishing 2nd, going on to 3rd grade. It's really the skills that they needed to have at the end of 2nd grade and the ones that they may need to have at the very beginning of 3rd grade. So it bridges instruction. And you can get those on Amazon. For older students, especially for kids in high school, even middle school, I really recommend a great website called readstoryit.com. And Storyit is a great way to teach vocabulary in the context of real stories. Many times our kids have to take standardized tests like the SOLs and definitely the SATs and the ACTs, and all they get are these boring flashcards, and they have to memorize the terms on the flashcards. Well, actually a better way, and what research says, is that kids hear those words in context. If they read them, if they listen to them, if they hear them in discussions, they're much, much more likely to remember them and to use them correctly. So Storyit is a way for kids to listen to stories, and the vocabulary words that they need to know for these tests are sprinkled throughout the story. They can click on them to read their definition. They can save them in their own online journal, but it's a pretty cool way to make it really come alive. It's really fun for kids. Also, there are some great apps that kids can download to their phones. A great one is called Words, 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 and also Vocab Builder. Both of those are meant to increase vocabulary. For younger students, I love the idea of a dialogue journal. When I was a teacher, one of my favorite things to do, especially when I taught 6th grade, was to have a dialogue journal with my students. So once a week, I would write to them and they would write back to me. And I always posed a question to them like, you know, not always something, what'd you do over the weekend, or what position do you play in soccer? What made you gravitate towards that position? And I found that kids would really write a lot to me, and they would write more than they'd ever write in a structured essay. And you can do the same thing with your child, and this is when you'd bring them to, you know, say Staples or Office Depot, let them buy. For your daughter, let her buy a sparkly journal with rhinestones. Maybe your son wants a camouflage journal, whatever. And every night, or every few nights even, write them a question. You know, maybe your question is, hey, I saw you make that layup in your basketball game today. That was so cool. How'd you get so good at that? So any type of question that you might want to ask is really helpful to get your child to write. If you just ask them to write in their journal, they're not going to want to do it. But ask them a question and have them ask you a question back. And this writing back and forth helps kids to associate writing with relaxation, because it's something that they will do right before bed. And be careful, you don't want to correct grammar or spelling. Make this something that they do and they want to do. It doesn't have to be perfect, and it really does make a great keepsake. Another thing that kids often want to do is they want to keep like a scrapbook. But, you know, kids aren't much too into scrapbooks these days. But there's a great PowerPoint tool, and on the previous slide is a link to tons of different binder-style templates that kids can use in PowerPoint. They can upload their graphics, the photographs that they took on vacation, and they can write about it. And it's something that kids can keep. They can share it at school in the fall, and it's really fun for them. Math. Let's talk a little bit about math, because it's one of those things that we certainly don't want to neglect. You know, these days teachers always tell us, kids don't know their math facts. And honestly, the summer is an awesome time for kids to get those math facts down and to hone them. So I think the best place to practice facts is on the web, and these are a couple of great websites. For multiplication, I love multiplication.com. You know, there's tons of addition and subtraction, fact-based games on Fun Brain and Math Playground. For older students, I really like the Power Up series. And this is a great series that you can get for any grade, for 5th grade, 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th. And it's basically just a review of what the student needed to know in that grade. And if your child, for example, is going into 8th grade and you want to get that, you know, your child wants a leg up, they can do the 8th grade book. It's a terrific series, and so is a program called Algebra to Go. I really like that one as a good, solid review of algebra. And I've also found that, especially in math, there's so many different ways that kids are learning math these days that sometimes a tutor is a great way to structure the summer. And for my own kids, I have a tutor every week who comes and does a lesson with them and then assigns them work. And I personally like that structure, and it doesn't come from me. Anytime it doesn't come from parents, somehow it's much more meaningful. But giving us the structure really helps make it a lot easier on parents. So a tutor is often a great way to go. And then finally, I must say, family game nights is something super fun that actually involves a lot of problem solving and math skills. And you know, it's interesting. Here in Virginia, we do the SOLs. And in other states, there's a lot of standardized testing too. And really, a lot of the standardized testing publishers are moving away from the rote memorization of facts, and they're really working on developing questions that measure critical thinking. And that's where we are now in education. The pendulum has shifted to just regurgitation of facts to, you know, how flexible can you be as a thinker? And games are such a great way to develop cognitive flexibility. This is a great website, educationallearninggames.com. But, you know, any of these games like Scrabble, the old-fashioned ones, Scrabble, Monopoly, Connect Four, Payday, are great for parents and kids alike. The Think Fun games are fabulous, too. You've probably seen them. My favorite one is Rush Hour. So what you want to do is have a schedule for games. And to make it fun, you give each person in your family a week to be responsible for picking the game, making the snack, and picking things like background music if they want to do that, or even making a dessert. But kids love this because they love to be responsible for laying it all out, getting the food together. It's kind of their thing, and it's such a great thing to do as a family. It's really memorable. So that would be kind of like a weekly thing to get families together and to really make learning count over the summer. So let's go with questions. Does anybody have a question for me that they want to ask? And if you do, go ahead and type it into me right now, and I'll read that back to you. But just to give you a few resources, on our website we have a tab on the top right-hand corner called Resources. And if you just click on that tab itself, not any of the drop-downs, but that tab, you'll see a whole host of websites, and there's a whole section for summer activities that are all around DC that you may want to consider. So that's a really great place to go. And then there's also a tab on resources called, on About Us, called Webinars. And there in Webinars we have lots of past webinars that we've done, ranging from, you know, motivation to college planning. So lots of different things. If you haven't put your question in, please go ahead and ask me now, and I'll answer those and go through anybody's thoughts at this point. You know, okay, one question Mom had is, how do I get my child prepared for middle school? How do I know what they need to be working on? And I would say for a middle schooler in math, the main thing that kids really need to be knowledgeable about is fractions, decimals, and percents. That is super important, and that's what I found. Actually, I taught 7th grade for a year, and I found that so much of what the kids learn has to do with those areas. They have to be able to certainly know their math facts, and believe it or not, sometimes kids entering 7th grade don't know all of their math facts. They really need to know those so they can work quickly, but they need to know how to reduce fractions quickly and how to convert fractions back to decimals. Certainly, the main thing outside of math, I would say that's super important in middle school is time management. And as parents, one thing that we want to do over the summer to hone time management skills is to really set up a calendar of what our kids are going to do over the summer. That doesn't just have to be about learning. That can also be about, okay, let's write down all your camps. What are the start times? What are the end times? And then on that same calendar, ask your child what can you commit to in terms of summer learning, about how many pages do you think you want to read on a daily basis, and have them write it down and check it off as they put an X through it as they go each day that they've accomplished the task. And if they have to change it, it's always done in pencil, because if they have to change it and modify it, they can definitely do that as they go. But the key is just budgeting time so that they don't procrastinate at the last minute. That's really important. All right, somebody said, hold on, I have a child with Asperger's who is going into 5th grade but really struggles with comprehension and thus does not enjoy reading. What are some tools to use during the summer to help my child with the comprehension side? Okay, there's a great program called Visualizing and Verbalizing, and that's through Linda Mood Bell. The website, I believe, is Gander, like Gander, G-A-N-D-E-R, publishing.com. And there you can see the VV program. That's the acronym for Visualizing and Verbalizing. And they sell workbooks based on the age, the grade level of the child. I would get the easier one. So if your child, for example, is going to 5th grade, get the 4th grade one. And there are activities that you work through. And basically, when kids have problems with comprehension, they're really not making a mental movie in their head of what they're reading. And the reason they don't enjoy it is that they're simply reading words. And reading words is no fun. There's no enjoyment from that. They need to be able to create a movie in their head so they can see what's happening in the story. And this program teaches them to start to think like a movie, to visualize what's happening in the story in their head. So that's definitely one I can recommend. All right. Let's see, how long do children work with their weekly tutor? What would be an appropriate amount of time per week for a rising 2nd, 4th, and 6th grader to work with a tutor? All right, well, it depends on what you want to accomplish. Sometimes parents have, I really recommend probably twice a week, because by the time the family's on vacation and the tutor's on vacation, that once a week time that ended up to was going to be 10 sessions is now 5, just because of the nature of summer, people come and go. I think that twice a week there's a lot more consistency, and I've found over the years doing this for a long time that consistency promotes growth. It's, when you have a tutor come just every now and then, it's not going to do a whole lot, but having a consistent pattern of tutoring is helpful. And then asking the tutor to leave follow-up work is important so that your child can work on it, and if you want, you can help your child to work on it too. That's when you're going to see the most gains, when they do a little bit every day. And that's a great thing about our tutors, is that they are fully equipped to leave really engaging follow-up work. So it's not just kill and drill, but there are fun things that the child can do too. And in our session notes, every time after each session, the tutor will post her the notes of what the tutor and the child did. They might say, today we worked on blah, blah, blah. The child made this progress, and this is the follow-up work. So it's all in writing. We review that information in the office so that we can see the progress the kids are making, and then it gets emailed out to you the following morning, so everybody has it in writing. All right, let's see. My son loves to read and write graphic novels. When should I encourage him to write in more traditional formats? I think graphic novels are really key, and a lot of times as educators we want to dismiss graphic novels. Diary of a Wimpy Kid really started the whole thing, where kids were really into those types of books with lots of pictures and not a lot of content. And I think that they're fine, but you're right. Eventually, we want to move away from them. But if your child is still reading graphic novels in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, I think it's fine. But as they get into older elementary school, I would probably move to something that's still captivating. And that book I mentioned, Chasing Lincoln's Killer, really gets a lot of boys who are into graphic novels off that type of literature and into real text. And if your child's still reluctant, bridge the gap by getting the book in Audible form so they can listen to it and follow along. Sometimes it's hard to take your child from one type of reading that they're really hooked on and completely switching them to another. So a happy medium would be getting that literature in Audible format. Could you email, somebody asked, can you email me the website about reading comprehension? And yes, I will. Okay, what primary decoding programs do you like for the child who has dyslexia that can be worked on at home over the summer? Well, honestly, there's not a tremendous amount out there on the market. I will say that, Explode the Code. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. I do like Explode the Code, and Explode the Code is just a basic phonics workbook series, but they now have a new online program that's actually pretty good. I will tell you, however, that kids with dyslexia, and kids with dyslexia are not, we always think, parents often think of them as kids that reverse letters and numbers. That's really not true. Dyslexia means that you have difficulty looking at a word and pulling the sounds apart and blending them back together. It's called decoding. And often kids with dyslexia see the word as a whole and they guess all the time. They guess at words instead of sounding them out, because their sounding out skills are very poor by nature. And so they have to be taught in a completely different way. But we do know that word families are not good for kids with dyslexia. So word families would be like cat, mat, sat, pin, sin, tin, where you're practicing words that have the same rhyming pattern. You're also practicing blends. So for a word like sat, you never want to teach it like at. You always want to teach it like at. So Explode the Code, unfortunately, is a great phonics program, but it does teach word families. So if you do it with your child, keep that in mind and make sure when they get to that part that they're pulling apart all the sounds in distinct pieces. And that will make Explode the Code a little bit better to use, and it's probably the easiest and the cheapest one to use that's out on the market. Okay, several of your recommendations are for online games and activities. What is a reasonable amount of online time for middle school children? For example, not more than 2 hours per day. Well, the American Academy for Pediatrics recommends about an hour and a half a day for online activity, even for middle school kids. But I will tell you, as a parent, I see that as completely unreasonable. I think that it's hard to limit your child's time to that much, because consider that texting is in that form as well. So as parents, what we can limit is TV and video games, and I am a firm believer in putting a cap on those, that's for sure. And that might be your hour and a half time. Also computer time to some degree. Sometimes kids will say to us, oh, but Mom, I'm researching this, or Dad, I need this for my school project. And oftentimes you see them on Facebook. Well, I would probably make that part of the hour and a half, and you can say TV, online games, or TV, Facebook, video games. Maybe that's an hour and a half, although that is not too much. And you can say that you can do online educational games in the kitchen or in the family room where I can see you. Those things would have different access. But really, your child only needs about a half hour a day on those types of things. They don't need to be sitting there, engaged in, say, Storyit for 2 hours, because the fact is they're really not going to do that program I mentioned, Storyit, for 2 hours. Usually a middle schooler's attention span is about a half-hour max, so that would be an appropriate amount of time on the computer. All right, is there any website for second grade math? And yes, on our website, in the resources tab on the right-hand side, there is a whole list of tons of math websites for kids. I mentioned a couple, and those are FunBrain and Math Playground, but really a full list can be found in that. And what I would recommend is that your child pick maybe 5 of those, go to those with your child and ask him which one do you like best? Which one do you think would be fun for you to learn facts on? And let him or her pick. That way they're invested in the decision. And in that way you know what you're getting into. You know what games are there and what they're really doing. All right, any last questions? Please go ahead and send them in to me before we wrap up. Okay, I think that's it. I think I've answered all the questions, and if you have any other questions that you want to ask at any other time, please feel free to email me. I can be reached at Ann, A-N-N, at EC Tutoring, or you can call our office at 703-934-8282. This is our last webinar of the season, but I'd love to hear from you for any other ideas. We're going to start these back up at the end of August for transition webinars, and these will be topics how to transition your child from elementary to middle school to high school. And those are really great topics for kids of all ages. They're just really important. That's when a lot of stress happens, when kids are moving from one grade to the next. But if you have an idea, please send them to me. We would love to hear from you. I hope that you have found that this is helpful. And again, my best wishes for a wonderful summer. Take care. Bye-bye.